more than 80% of us now walk into our physician's office completely informed, or at least we believe we are, about the disease we have. We also know exactly what treatment we believe we want, and it's completely turned everything on its head. So social media and the availability of data has changed the way pharmaceutical has to market.
Welcome to the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast, where we delve deep into the life sciences industry and uncover effective strategies, innovations, and future trends. Your host, Axtria's Jasmeet Soni, engages highly acclaimed leaders in discussions focused on directing commercial success in the life sciences industry. Whether you're transforming your commercial success strategy or just craving dynamic discussion, this is the show for you.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Jasmeet Soni and welcome to the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast brought to you by Axtria. Our goal with this show is to bring to you effective strategies, innovations, and most importantly, people who are driving improved business and patient outcomes within the life sciences industry. Our guest today is Kevin Brode. Kevin has been in the industry for over 30 years. He has extensive leadership and sales experience scaling divisions of several top 50 organizations within the life sciences and healthcare industry. His expertise in leading global teams has resulted in immense upside, with him turning around and running portfolios as big as $500 million. He has managed programs that spanned 50 countries and has been presented a presidential award. Kevin, as described by his colleagues, is an energy engine for any organization and has been invited to give motivational speeches across the nation. Kevin draws upon his experience at BMS, Procter & Gamble, Hitachi Data Systems, and Wolters Kluwer Health. He excels in crafting advanced strategies and real-world solutions to drive market-leading growth as he focuses on maximizing business impact through data, analytics, and technology transformation. And if that was not enough, apart from his impact within the life sciences and healthcare space, Kevin is also a master baker. And there are not many people who can compete with him when it comes to baking breads the old-fashioned way. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jasmeet. I'm not sure I can live up to that. So, gosh, you've set the bar kind of high for me.
You absolutely can. I've known you. So, Kevin, let's begin this conversation by understanding what the customer segment of one really means. Are we talking about all customers of pharma, namely patients, prescribers, payers, or a specific customer? And also, should we think about segment of one as futuristic or something that is relevant today?
Yeah, and Jasmeet, I think that's a great question. And I think segment of one can be defined however a healthcare customer thinks of customers, and whether that is in the payer space, whether it's in the pharmaceutical or the provider space. We're getting to a world where mass marketing across a broad swath of people really no longer applies. And while it at times will seem futuristic, the reality is marketing to N of one is today. It's not the future. Our diseases are now starting to move towards catering to an N of one with customized solutions and therapies for individuals. The marketing, sales, and approach from the healthcare industry has to reflect that. So that's a today situation. If you think about where let's talk about pharmaceutical for a few moments, was a number of years ago. They used to pursue something that was called a blockbuster mentality. These were products that were going to be expected and defined to move into the marketplace, sell more than $1 billion, called them a blockbuster. And a lot of times these products did not have any significant differentiation. There would be maybe a change in the salt compound, something like that, but they were pushed into the marketplace through just massive amounts of share of voice. Lots of representatives selling those products. And so that's historically kind of where medicines were a number of years ago. And then as technology continued to improve and genomics work and just really the synthesis of healthcare, we started to see products that moved away from this generic blockbuster mentality, me too, if you will, because the FDA was starting to stop approving them. They just didn't see enough advantage, that you moved to products that had real differentiation, and they became much more refined in who the target audience was, the mechanism of action, and how they were going to work. So with that evolution, what we've seen is the marketing and sales of products are lagging a little bit behind because we worked so many years in that share of voice model that moving it clear down to a target audience of one and actually starting to think about patients as customers is relatively new thinking, or at least it feels new, but in actuality, it really isn't.
So that really sounds exciting in terms of N of 1 segments, especially in the context of where we are today in the industry. Can you provide some examples within or outside of the industry where customer segment of 1 has been implemented successfully?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that if you went to a website today, you already were an N of 1 customer for someone. You could have been an N of 1 customer for Amazon or Google or Microsoft. If yesterday you happened to search on a garden rake, today, when you go to any website, you're going to actually have garden rake advertisements showing up. They're going to show up in your email. They may show up on the websites that you cruise. They may show up on your phone. And so we have N of 1 marketing and sales already taking place, and has taken place a number of years ago. You even saw organizations like Kroger, which is a food company out of, I think, the northeastern part of the country. Kroger had tons and tons of data. So when you walked into a Kroger store and you walked into a certain area, you could actually see coupons came out that were relevant to you because Kroger understood your buying behavior. So even years ago, organizations, mostly outside of healthcare, were starting to pursue marketing to N of 1. What does, in this case, Kevin, what is he interested in? If we know where he is, we know his demographic, we know his situation, we're not going to hand him a diapers coupon. That isn't going to be reflective of where Kevin is, but we may hand him a barbecue sauce coupon or something with pickles or whatever my interest is. You started to see that outside of the industry. Well, healthcare has now moved to where we have to market N of 1, because if you look at advanced technologies like CAR-T in oncology, CAR-T is a personalized therapy. It's actually taking your cells, your T cells, and working with them and then re-administering them back to you. And so that therapy is incredibly personal. How do you market that if it isn't an N of 1? Because it is specific to that individual. So we've seen it outside the industry. We tend to see organizations that set their frameworks up early to handle that kind of data. Google was a data company. Netflix is a data company. They set up the frameworks to be able to do that. So they're ahead of the curve in most cases to N of 1. Healthcare have been set up to help people get better. So they did not necessarily set their frameworks up as data companies. And so right now they're trying to figure out how do they move to N of 1.
I mean, those are great examples. Both tech and retail have done a great job of delivering personalized customer experiences, as you pointed out. And it continues to improve with data they're able to collect every day. In terms of enabling this, it seems the interplay of sales and marketing will be extremely critical. How do you see pharma sales and marketing functions evolve in the near future? And what is the readiness of pharma commercial organizations to be able to deliver experiences that are catered to a segment of 1?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I think there's a difference between capabilities, desire, and readiness. I think that most of the folks I talk to in the healthcare industry are ready for that, yet the ability to execute on it can be really, really difficult. I mean, there are lots of legal and regulatory restrictions around how healthcare medicines therapies are marketed. You have to be fair balanced. And there's a lot of side effects that happen with drugs. While there's a lot of advantages to them, there can be side effects. And so, what you don't hear in kind of other advertising outside of healthcare, at the end of the commercial, you don't hear 35 seconds of everything that could go wrong in your life if you bought this car. You just get to see that the car's really fast, it looks really good, and you'd like to have one. They don't sit there and say, this car is a lot faster, 35% of the people will have an accident within the first 3 months, on and on. But in healthcare, you have to give that fair balance. So if you talk about curing someone or helping improve their diabetes or something like that, at the end of the commercial, the infomercial, you've got 35 seconds of talking about all the things that could also go wrong. And so healthcare always worked through and try to work in most cases around what they call a learned intermediary, which is typically your physician. They don't necessarily want to have direct dialogue with the patients because they're not practitioners of medicine. They don't have those licenses. So your physician is typically who recommends a product, and that's the learned intermediary. Well, social media has turned that all on its head, because what happens now, and we all have done this, that we used to go into our doctor to try and decide what we had, and they would help diagnose it and then tell us what we had and what the medicines are. More than 80% of us now walk into our physician's office completely informed, or at least we believe we are, about the disease we have. We also know exactly what treatment we believe we want, and it's completely turned everything on its head. So social media and the availability of data has changed the way pharmaceutical has to market. But again, that change that happens so quickly, again, on the shoulders of data companies like Facebook and Twitter and all those kind of things, they were able to execute on that very quickly. The reach for social media is just staggering, but that doesn't mean that companies that were not set up to do that can keep up with that speed. So right now, there are lots of the information systems within healthcare companies are in disparate places. So your x-rays and your CAT scans may have been stored in one place, prescriptions in another place, your health records here. I mean, think about, it wasn't that many years ago, and to some extent still today, moving your electronic medical record from one facility to the next, or if you got an x-ray or a CAT scan or an MRI somewhere and then getting that information back to your physician, many times is still you taking a disc from that facility and taking it to your doctor so that he or she can actually look at that. And so that disparate collection of information is not an easy solve on how do you pull that together. And again, that amplified by the fact that we're now trying to do this for an individual person. So if it was a group of people, that's easier. Go back to that blockbuster mentality and you talk about making cholesterol better or things like that. That's an easier ask. But if we're now going to talk about a very personalized medicine, and or we're going to talk about a disease state that is relatively limited, there's not hundreds of thousands of people, maybe there's 5,000 people that suffer from the disease, but the disease is debilitating. How do they pull information together to be able to talk to that patient, talk to the person that actually needs that medicine so that we can help diagnose earlier, we can identify the early stages of disease and get in front of the disease before it ravages the individual and the customer?
Well, that is so relevant, Kevin, because you talked about the changing patient behavior. And I guess, all of us can relate to it. You and I probably have the same behavior when we walk into a physician's office today. And what this requires is a fresh approach and a new commercial model. Does it mean that sales and marketing are going to become more integrated? And is that integration even realistic given the complex environments and rigid team structures?
Yeah, and I think yes, to the quick answer, Jasmeet, is yes. They're going to have to become more integrated. And I think there's a desire to do that. Anyone I talk to in the healthcare space, there's certainly a desire to drive better information to the point of relevancy for patients, institutions, accounts, whatever that is. But there are some significant challenges there. There are technology challenges. Again, pulling that data together is not going to be easy. And it's not one of the fun things that organizations take on when they're looking at their budgeting process. Moving for extra storage and connectivity between different data elements and the speed with which data is coming in. They're trying to just stay on top of it because the volume of data is, I believe, tenfold every year. And so what used to be at our house, and we laughed at this several years ago, no one could ever fathom having a hard drive at your own home that would be a terabyte. 5 or 6 years ago, that was just ridiculous thinking. I've got 5 and 10 terabyte drives sitting at my house now, and I'm looking at larger ones. And so 5 and 6 years ago, that was a fantasy. It's literally reality. You've got drives that are bigger than the storage that was required in entire healthcare systems just 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so what they're trying to do is say, how do we bring this complex environment, the need for personalized marketing and sales, and this onrush of data that's coming at us right now to create a cohesive marketing plan for N of 1. And so that continues to be a challenge. I think, again, that's where I go back, Jasmeet, earlier. I think there's strong desire, but the ability to do that is something that organizations are going to have to take on head on right now, because it's not going to get any better. If you solve it for today, it's going to be exponentially more valuable than if you put it off. It's going to be exponentially more difficult in the next several years.
So the desire is there, but how do you execute is the big question. Now, you talk about the processes and technology, and I guess the processes is key here that are required to make this happen. In your view, how should pharma leaders think about the future of sales and marketing, whether it's alignment or integration? Are there specific guidelines or a framework that executives can follow?
Yeah, I think so, Jasmeet. I think that we have to turn the lens backwards from where it was before. I mean, for years and years and years, we were promoting medicines and products to physicians. That's not the world anymore. And so lots of activity was around understanding physician behavior, how physicians would prescribe, how do we educate them, and those kind of things. Well, now the challenge is I've got to start thinking about the patient, because the book a number of years ago that takes a community to raise a child or something like that. There are so many people that impact customers and patients' decision making when you think about the patient journey, that pharmaceutical companies are going to have to think about the customer first, or customer 360, if you will. What are the things that are impacting that end-stage patient to help them understand their journey in pursuit or acquisition of a disease and or treatment of those diseases? And so we've been thinking about how do we promote to physicians, but we've got to think about how do we start educating patients, because if the patients are going to continue to come in already educated with a point of view, then we're going to have to inform that point of view, because we all know that there is so much bogus information out on the internet. How do we get good, solid clinical information in a fashion that customers, patients can understand? How do we get that into their hands to help them be more informed about their disease? We talked about years ago when we were treating generalized anxiety disorder. Generalized anxiety disorder was treated symptomatically more than the actual underlying disease for a number of years, because the symptoms of it were things like sleeplessness or neck pain or back pain or something like that. So you go to your doctor, I'm not sleeping very well. He or she gives you something to sleep better. Oh, you've got a little bit of a back pain, let me give you a muscle relaxer or something like that. Yet it took a while for everyone to understand that actually the underlying disease there was generalized anxiety disorder. It was simply being exacerbated through symptoms. And so organizations have to think about the customer now as their end target, and they need to think innovatively about that, because you just don't have reps go out and talk to customers. That's not a viable mechanism. It also crosses all kinds of legal and regulatory barriers that you don't want to cross. But how do you educate that patient? And so it's going to all be about innovation. It's not going to be what got us here for the last 10 years are going to get us into the next 10 years. That simply isn't going to work. So innovation needs to be key for these organizations, and they need to be able to test quickly and fail quickly and be comfortable with that, because if you sit back and you're looking to see if it works or you're cautious about it, the market is going to move in front of you. And so we've got lots of different points of view on this, because we've seen organizations that have tested quickly, failed quickly, but have identified opportunities to have dialogue with the appropriate folks within the treatment chain. And those can be communities, they can be treatment groups, they can be advisory groups, it can be nurses. There's a whole bunch of folks that actually impact the treatment journey. So organizations are going to have to think innovatively about how do they influence all of those touch points that inform a patient's pursuit and ultimate treatment for their disease.
So the message that I get given is patient journey, and understanding of the patient journey is going to be key, and how we get ourselves embedded into that seamlessly is going to be critical in enabling this customer first perspective. And it's at the heart of all problem solving that pharma needs to do today. And the transition to segment of one will become much easier if that is going to happen. Are there any first steps you would recommend to executives working towards enabling segment of one experiences?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've seen work successfully, and I would encourage executives and leadership to think about, is we need to start bringing talent into the industry that are outside of the industry. We are all, to some extent, constrained by the environment that we've grown up in. I've been in healthcare for 30 years, so I operate within constraints of healthcare because I simply have operated within them for years. I couldn't think about providing any kind of information that didn't have fair balance. I would never even think about it because that's the environment I've always worked in. But we see external environments, other industries that have lots and lots of creative thinking. And so I think what we're going to have to start doing is putting some of those talented people and those ideas from adjacent industries, cutting edge industries into the healthcare ecosystem. And they're going to help us solve in creative ways that many of us won't even think about because of our legacy. And that doesn't mean that the ideas that they come to the table with are all going to fly, because they still have to fall within the constraints of healthcare promotion, education, and those kind of things. But their thinking tends to be different. And I've seen organizations start to bring that kind of talent in to kind of upset the apple cart, if you will. Let's think differently about how we talk to our customers and define that customer as a hospital system, define it as a physician, define it as a patient. It doesn't matter, but we're going to have to start breaking and pushing the edges to understand how do we get more effective at an N of one, because the acceleration of this is staggering. It's easy when you want to market, sell, and promote to 20,000 physicians at the same time with a consistent message. That's not very difficult to do, and we've been doing that for years. But what happens when you need to talk to 10,000 patients that each have their own individual journey, and you want to educate them on their disease, you want to educate them on the treatment options that are available to them, and you want to help them make a good decision? That just became 1,000,000 times more difficult than your first promotion. So I would encourage CEOs, executive leadership teams to be thinking about how do they put team members into their organization that are going to challenge the thinking. We actually do it at Axtria and Just Meet, you're familiar with it, where we will partner our young employees that we bring into the organization that aren't constrained with some of the folks that have been around for a number of years. And it's that synergy that comes from the tension from someone that's been doing this for 30 years and can't even think about that, and a little bit agog, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that, with the new folks that are sitting there saying, why haven't we not done that? And so it's that tension and the dialogue that happens there where there's real magic. So I would encourage leadership of these organizations to be thinking that way. It's one way to instill innovation into your organization. That's an easy first step.
That makes a lot of sense, Kevin. Bringing in the right kind of talent, and this could be from another industry, and training the talent and then finding the synergies is an absolutely brilliant thing. And I think that's how the innovation would come into place that we need at this time. Kevin, thanks for sharing. I mean, those are some great first steps. Now, it'll be a miss on my end if we didn't talk about baking and bread. And I'm pretty sure you have an analogy to make it contextual to our topic today. Are there any similarities you see in baking a good loaf of bread, and how pharma sales and marketing need to work together to enable the segment of one?
Oh, wow. Now, Jasmeet, I didn't see that question coming along, but I think that there are actually some similarities. When you think about the baking process, it is all small elements that have to come together to ultimately produce the loaf you want at the end of the bake. And so I always pick on sourdough. Sourdough is a very, very popular bread, but it is wildly difficult. And it is different every single day. It responds to humidity, it responds to heat, temperature, all kinds of things. And you have to get the 15 steps roughly with sourdough. All of them have to come together and be right to ultimately produce the loaf you want at the end. And it's that orchestrated dance, if you will, between the mixing early on, the portions of materials that go in, flour, salt, water, starter, and those kind of things. And if there are any elements of that process, Jasmeet, that goes awry, I either have to be able to respond to it immediately to adjust for it, or else I've got failure in front of me. And believe me, talk about failing fast. I've got more failures I can point to than probably successes. My wife laughs and she said, I don't know why you do this. She said, you're so frustrated by it. But sourdough is really where the technical, because you weigh everything out, the recipes are the same, anyone can get them, but that's where it comes together with the art. And I think that's what can happen in pharma also. I think there's technical things that need to be solved, but there are so many really bright people in the pharma industry and the healthcare industry in general. And if they come together and they bring some of their art to what they're seeing, it's that magic that comes together, that while they won't produce a great sourdough loaf, I'll go ahead and keep doing that at my bakery, but they can bring fabulous solutions to the marketplace. And I've got confidence that they can do that.
So orchestration is key. And what a way to tie commercial business and baking bread. You exude passion in both areas, and I can easily see why you're successful in both, Kevin. Thank you for all those insights. Before we go, I would like to summarize our discussion so the audience has some key takeaways. So what I understand is, one, segment of one won't happen overnight or on its own. You have to plan for it. The mindset needs to change, and it requires a combination of disruptive and transformative approaches to make it happen. Two, data preparedness is critical. Companies need to strengthen their ability to capture and organize data at scale. And three, executives need to get uncomfortable. The change is not coming. It's already here. Life sciences customers expect personalized experiences, and companies that are unable to deliver will be left behind. Is there anything else you would like to add to this summary?
No, Jasmeet, I think if anything, if I wanted to reemphasize one of your points, I think we need to get uncomfortable. I think we need to have a little bit of uncomfort every day. We need to be challenging ourselves to push the edge, because I think our customers, and I think healthcare deserves that. We can't get lazy here. We can't get complacent. It's going to be keeping ourselves on the edge. Technology and healthcare solutions and healthcare medicines are moving so quickly. It's our responsibility to the community and to the world to stay out in front of that and provide the very best solutions for them. So, Jasmeet, I really appreciate the time and I think your summary of what we talked about today is spot on.
Thank you, Kevin. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. You talked about an important topic, yet something that is difficult to solve. On one hand, pharma is struggling to meet the expectation of its customers, and on the other, sales and marketing alignment that is required to enable personalized experiences is a complex puzzle that the executives are trying to solve. I'm confident our audience learned a lot today and will be able to apply some of these learnings to their commercial business in order to prepare for the future. Before we go, is there anything that our audience can refer to if they wanted to learn further about this topic?
Yeah, Jasmeet, I would, I'm certainly going to point people to the Axtria website. Underneath our Axtria Insights section, there's a lot of content, really an abundance of thought leadership in various formats, whether that's white papers or blogs or videos, webinars, 5-step guides, podcasts, and much, much more. So I would point people to axtria.com and find that section on the website. There's some great thinking there, and I believe everyone could learn from it.
Kevin, thank you so much for coming to the show and sharing your knowledge and deep experience in this space. To the audience, thank you so much for joining us today, and tune in soon for the next episode.
My pleasure, Jasmeet. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Life Sciences Leadership Podcast. If you loved this episode, please share with friends and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. For more information, visit lifesciencespodcast.com. Until next time.